At 54 millimeters, this is the thickest rad that I have ever top mounted in an SFF build. Even then, this is still a very manageable setup. It's easy to get in and maintain, and very few things are out of reach, and that's what's unique about the NCase M3. Welcome to Machines More. So I did an initial review in the M3 recently, and there I did a big air build with 𝐓𝐇𝐈𝐂𝐊 D15G2. So I ended up taking that one apart. That setup is going into the solid panel M3 that I have for configuration testing. But I thought I would try a special build in the Grater before moving on to that project. So the goal here first is the thick radiator, and that could be used in a smaller case with a side mount, but I also wanted to keep things as open as possible in this build and be able to switch out fans for fan testing and things like that. I also wanted it to look good and neat and tidy and also stay quiet. So let's just talk about the components in the build. Initially, I started with the MSI B860i that I'm still testing, but that board I received didn't actually work, had some issues with it. I'm sure I'll be able to get a working one eventually, but I stuck with the same Gigabyte Z890i from the big air build. It is a very nice board. Fan does cover the I/O side display of the board, which is kind of neat, but it's not a biggie that it's obstructed. We have the same Intel Core Ultra 9 285K, G-Skill's Trident DDR5, ASUS's low-key 80 Plus Platinum SFX-L power supply, and the ASUS TUF 5070 Ti. Onto the cooling components. This radiator is the Corsair XR7. It's 54 millimeters thick, and I believe these are Hardware Labs radiators, and they're super high performing. One of the primary concerns with top mounting a thicker radiator is that you simply would have obstructions, either the motherboard, power supply, you name it, right? But the M3 actually gives us just the right amount of width for that, and that allows us to place the rad right up against the power supply. And you'll notice that the radiator panel doesn't actually attach at 2 points anymore because I had to push it so far forward. It works, but it's really not the best setup. Maybe that's something they can work on in a future iteration. Actually, I had to use one of the earliest M2 panels that I had, which has a slightly narrower frame. Otherwise, in this position, the current radiator panel won't fit with the side panel, but we have to do it this way in order to clear the power supply. One thing is, I think I could have front mounted the power supply, but then I wouldn't have the back fan or a clean direct tubing run like this, so that's why I ended up going with this setup. As I mentioned earlier, this setup prioritizes accessibility, and so the headers, they're easily accessible behind the radiator. The board is still mostly open, so we don't have the limitations of a traditional side mount. And in general, this case is really easy to work in and maintain. On the CPU, I have the ModUltra Lobo combo block, which has the DDC pump inside. Unfortunately, with the way the pump heatsink is set up, I had to choose between having the cables run visibly down versus having a seemingly upside down cover, but without cables visible. So I chose the latter, and it's not the worst. The other objective here was to keep the tubing as clean as possible. For now, it is a CPU only loop. If I can get a water block for the GPU, I will install another rad at the bottom, either 240, 280. Here, just to keep the tubing as simple as possible, I had to lower the board so that the block's first port could line up directly with the closest port on the rad, with just a 90-degree fitting there. And again, the M3 makes that easy. I just lower the standoffs to the best position, and it actually lines up perfectly. The tubing here is Bits Power's plated brass. I've got Bits Power and 𝐓𝐇𝐈𝐂𝐊 fittings. They match the 𝐓𝐇𝐈𝐂𝐊 Apex stealth metal fans, which have that beautiful chrome finish here. Normally, I think I would go with a set of 𝐓𝐇𝐈𝐂𝐊s, but these fans they're pretty decent. And I've also got one at the back as an exhaust. Since they don't use conventional fan screws, but rather countersunk machine screws, you do need these cylindrical nuts on the outboard side to hold them in. But interestingly, because they mount like this, I could get a full set of 4 screws on this fan, because that fourth hole location at the back is usually inaccessible because it's used to hold the GPU hanger, but I could run an M3 screw straight into that thread, and now both screws can mostly fit there. So it's kind of fun to have solved that problem that way. I did build in sort of a stealthy T at the bottom for filling. It can be a little bit trickier to fill these resless combo blocks. So that is pretty helpful there. So probably the most utility-driven decision here. You notice I have an HDD mounted to the main board panel of the case towards the front right here. Now that's more of a placeholder. It's kind of a proof of concept at this point. I just threw in an old Seagate one in there to see how it'll work. And even with all this stuff here, it's kind of wild that a full 3.5-inch HDD can fit quite cleanly. Now, it has been a while since I've sat next to one of these, so I forgot how loud these things are when they are spinning up next to you. So I was kind of originally going to move an 8TB drive in here to replicate my data off of my file server, but it really will depend on the noise level, because either the Grater is just too porous for noise, or I need to add some dampening to the mounting points. But you know, I'm kind of leaning towards just swapping that out for an intake fan now. The 𝐓5070 is a big, thick card. It actually works very quietly, as you might expect with so much cooler here. And there are some room for fans there. I don't think it's really necessary. You'll see the thermals are quite good even without them. Even with how I lowered the board a bit, there's still plenty of space here for the GPU. There's about 80 millimeters of room. So if I do water block it, say with a 30 millimeter block, there's still a decent amount of room for a 280 or 240 plus fans. Now, one thing I noticed at first was the card was sagging at the far corner, as it normally would with such a big card. You could usually use the included tough GPU support foot in a big case vertically, but it's not usually applicable in SFF. It's kind of funny because this bracket fit perfectly on its side to prop it up, and I just used the knob to secure it to the bottom of the case, so it kind of worked out really well. And yeah, the card's really quiet. With the 285K at full load, the fan curve I set had the fans coming in at 1750 RPM. With these stealth metal fans, it's not an unpleasant noise level. They are actually way quieter with just these two fans running at that level compared to the D15G2 setup, which required 3 cooler fans at 100%. So these two stock A14G2Rs plus that A12x25G2, those aren't particularly egregious at the max, but this is much more pleasant. It's kind of like a gentle rumble when the CPU is fully loaded, and these temps, they're absolutely fine. Now, if I wanted to, the fans can go up to 3000 RPM, but that is not at all the goal here. Temps are already quite good, and I think the noise levels are it's very noise optimized. For 1440p gaming, the 𝐓5070 Ti card is very quiet. Full load, the fans topped out at 1100 RPM, which really wasn't audible, and these are still good temps all around. I don't know that I have to stick a water block on this one for how well it already works, but these things are usually not about practicality, right? Applications, I have been using it for video editing. I will try it as a daily driver for a little bit. I'll use it for fan testing. Some of you might notice the footage looking a little bit different. I'm shooting in RAW with a different main camera. The system just chews through it like it's nothing, which is really nice. The NVENC encoders on the 50 series cards are just wild. Some things I want to change. Well, I'm going to try and get a glass panel for this one. That would make sense here. And I did clean up the cables as much as I could, but I really do need to get a custom cable set for this power supply, and that will take the build to the next level. Another thing is, originally I was hoping for the MSI X870i to be available for this build. Color-wise, it would have been a great match. I wanted the 5GE NIC, and when that lands, I will swap out, since my personal preference for this type of build is the 9950X or 9950X3D. But yeah, in SFF right now, I think you can only do something like this with the M3. Most of this was possible because of how flexible the case is for setup. That allows things to line up and fit exactly as I intended. So do stay tuned as I continue to update this one. If you enjoyed, please leave a like. Make sure you're subscribed. The components linked down below. Big thanks for watching.